why is it that we are already living in a world that is not making us happy? And is that the responsibility of technology? And I don't think it's exactly technology. Human beings, among our gifts, are fundamentally technological, whether we're talking about quantum computing or flint knapping an arrowhead. What has happened to us that has created the growing, spreading, morphing dystopia is a process that Heather and I, in our book, A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, call hypernovelty. Hypernovelty is the fact of the rate of change outpacing our capacity to adapt to change. And we are already well past the threshold here where the world that we are young in is not the world that we are adults in. And that mismatch is making us sick across multiple different domains. So the question that I ask is the change that you're talking about going to reduce the rate of change, in which case we could build a world that would start meeting human needs better, open opportunities for pursuing meaningful work? Or is it going to accelerate the rate of change, which is, in my opinion, guaranteed to make us worse off? So if it was a one-time shift, right, AI is going to dawn, it's going to open all sorts of new opportunities, there's going to be a tremendous amount of disruption, but from that we'll be able to build a world. Is that world going to be stable, or is it going to be just one event horizon after the next? If it's the latter, then it effectively says what it does to the humans, which is it's going to dismantle us.
When I look out at society, I go, okay, it's having a negative impact. When I look at individual use cases, it's having a profoundly positive impact, including for me, it's having a very positive impact. So it's one of these things where I wonder, what is it that we need to teach people at school so that they understand the world that we're going into? Because one of the biggest issues that we're having is that we're sending kids to school with this blueprint, this template that they're going to have this long arc career that no longer exists, that essentially we're treating them like learning LLMs. And we're saying, okay, we're going to prompt you. You're going to give us the right answer. You're going to hallucinate it if possible. And, and then we go, okay, now go off into the world. And they go, oh, but wait a second. I don't know how money works. I don't know how society works. I don't know how my brain works. I don't know how I'm meant to handle this novelty problem. I'm not sure how to approach someone in a social situation and ask if they want to go on a date. So all the important things that actually are the important milestones that people want to be able to hit and that technology can actually have an impact on, we get no user manual. So I think one of the biggest things that has to happen is we have to equip young people all through school to actually prepare them for the world that's coming, or the world that's here.
Well, on the one hand, I think you outlined the problem very well. Effectively, we have a model of what school is supposed to do that, at best was sort of a match for the 50s or something like that. And it woefully misses the mark with respect to preparing people for the world they actually face. If we were going to prepare them, I would argue that the only toolkit worth having at the moment is a highly general toolkit. Mm-hmm. The capacity to think on your feet and pivot as things change is the only game in town with respect to our ability to prepare you in advance. Maybe the other auxiliary component to that would be teaching you what we know, which is frankly not enough, about how to live a healthy life, right? If we could induce people into the kinds of habits of behavior and consumption of food, and then train them to think on their feet, they might have a chance in the world that's coming. But the fly in the ointment is we don't have the teachers to do it. We don't have people who know, and that is the question, is could the AI actually be utilized in this manner to actually induce the right habits of mind for people to live in that world?
I spend a lot of time in education technology. One thing that is, as we say on the internet, a black pill about education in general, education intervention, is there's a lot of data that shows that there are very little interventions you can make in education to generate better outcomes. And so, there's been a lot of experiment around pedagogy, around, how to configure the classroom that have resulted in very marginal improvements. There's only one intervention, and this has been reproduced many times, that creates 2 sigma, 2 standard deviation positive outcomes in education, meaning you're better than 99% of everyone else. And that is one-on-one tutoring.
I thought so. Yeah, I was going to say smaller classrooms and personalization.
One-on-one tutoring, yeah. And by the way, if you look, someone also did a survey of all the geniuses the Einsteins of the world and found that they all had one-on-one tutoring. They all had someone in their lives that took interest in them and tutored them. So what can create one-on-one tutoring opportunity for every child in the world?
AI.
AI.
My kids use it, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
As in, like, they're interacting and it's adapting to their speed.
Yes.
And it's giving them different analogies to work with. So, like, my son was learning about division, and it's asking him to smash glass and how many pieces he smashes it into with this hammer. And, and it's saying things like, no, Xander, go for it, really smash it. And he's loving it, right?
Is that synthesis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an investor in this company.
Oh, well, it was great. It's great to watch that simulated one-on-one tutoring because it's talking to him, it's asking him questions.
Bret, you're an educator. You spent much of your life teaching people in universities. How do you receive all of this?
Well, on the one hand, I agree that the closer to one you get, the better. But I also personally believe that 0 to 1 is best. And what I mean by that is part of what's gone wrong with our educational system is that it is done through abstraction, and effectively the arbiter of whether you have succeeded or failed in learning the lesson is the person at the front of the room. And that's okay if the person at the front of the room is truly insightful, and it's terrible if the person at the front of the room is lackluster, which happens a lot. So what doesn't work that way is interaction with the physical world in which nobody has to tell you whether you've succeeded or failed. If you're faced with an engine that doesn't start, you can't argue it into starting. You have to figure out what the thing is that has caused it to fail. And then there's a great reward when you alter that thing and suddenly it fires up. So I'm a big fan of being as light-handed as possible and as concrete as possible in teaching. In other words, when I've done it, and not just with students, but with my own children, I like to say as little as possible, and I like to let physical systems tell the person when they've succeeded or failed, and that creates an understanding. You can extrapolate from one system to the next, and you know that you're not just extrapolating from one person's misunderstanding, you're extrapolating from the way things actually work. So I don't know if AI can be leveraged in that context. My sense is there's probably a way to do it, but one would have to be deliberate about it.
Especially with robotics and humanoid robots.
Actually, that is the place where you can do this, is with robotics. That it seems to me, yeah. Well, robotics will teach you the physical computing part of it, and then the question is, how do you infuse this with AI so that it provokes you out of some eddy where you're caught and moves you into the ability to solve some next level problem that you wouldn't have found on your own.
What do you think should be taught in the classroom with everything that you now know?
Well, you're all fathers here. You all have your own children. So it's a good question for you.
How old are your kids?
3 and 5.
19 and 21.
And 6, 7, and 10.
My children are very young, but we already do use AI, and I sit down with them in front of Repla, and we generate ideas and make games. And I would say, what Bret said about generality is very important. The ability to pivot and kind of learn skills quickly. Being generative is very, very important. Having a fast pace of generating ideas and iterating on those ideas. We sit down in front of ChatGPT, and my kid imagines scenario. What if there's a cat on the moon? And then, what if the moon is made of cheese? And what if there's a mouse inside it? And so we keep generating these variations of these different ideas. And I find that, makes them more imaginative and creative.
Rule number 1 that I tell my kids is stay away from porn at all costs. I'd rather you have a drug problem than a porn problem. And I actually mean that. I think porn is more dangerous to the human being, as bad as a drug problem is. But when we get to the question of how to confront the world and the things that you're going to be expected to do in the workplace and all of that, my point to them is you are facing the dawning of the age of complex systems that you are going to have to interact with. And in the age of complex systems, you have to understand that you cannot blueprint a solution, and you have to approach these systems with a upgraded toolkit of humility, because the ability of the system to do something you don't predict is much greater than a highly complicated system. So you have to anticipate that and be very sensitive to the fact that what you intended to happen is not what's going to happen. So you have to monitor the unintended consequences of whatever your action is, and that there are really 2 tools which work. One of which you just mentioned, which is the prototyping. You prototype things. You don't imagine that I know the solution to this and I'm going to build it. You imagine, I think there's a solution down there. I'm going to make a proof of concept, and then I'm going to discover what I don't know, and I'm going to make the next version, discover what I don't know. And eventually you may get to something that actually truly accomplishes the goal. So prototyping is one thing. And also, instead of using the blueprint as the metaphor in your mind, navigate. You can navigate somewhere. And that the way I think of it is a surfer is in some ways mastering a complex system, but they're not doing it by planning their days surfing down the waves. You can't do that. What you can do is you can be expert at absorbing feedback and navigating your way down the wave, and that's the right approach for a complex system. Nothing else is going to work. And so I guess the final piece is general tools, always, no specialization. This is the age of generalists, and invest in those tools and they will pay.
So the guiding philosophy for me is to produce high agency generalists. So ultimately, I want them to be motivated, self-starters, and have a wide general toolkit. I imagine them very much what you imagine, which is instructing robots, instructing agents, coming up with ideas. And I imagine them having a very high velocity life where they may be writing a book, organizing a festival, having a podcast, starting a business, and being part of somebody else's business all at once.
As they are of the ADHD.
Yeah, right. So the high agency generalist is the kind of guiding philosophy. Some of the things that we do is like we do chess, we do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we do dancing, we do acting classes, playing in nature, entrepreneurship, understanding that you can start a lemonade. We just did lemonade stands, which was amazing. We sold lots of lemonade on the street. So those kind of things, and jumping from one thing to the next thing, but also trying to avoid too many screens and forcing them into making stuff from what's going on around the house. Some distinctions that we try and give them is the difference between creating and consuming, because I think AI has this superpower of making you a hyper consumer or a hyper creator. And if you don't understand the distinction between creation and consumption, you end up falling into the consumption trap, whether it be porn or just news or things that feel like you're productive, but you're actually just consuming stuff.
Won't that be the most successful AI? The one that plays with my dopamine the most?
Yeah, and makes you think that you're achieving something when you're actually just consuming something. So trying to give them the understanding that there is this difference in their life between creation and consumption, and to be on the creation side.